Welcome to our deep dive into the world of Nostradamus.
Oh, Nostradamus.
Yeah, this guy who continues to kind of fascinate us even centuries after his life. We've got all these sources,
Hmm.
biographies and analyses, and even some modern takes on his prophecies. And what
Right.
I'm really kind of curious about is this. Why do we keep coming back to this guy?
Right.
Like, what is it about Nostradamus that still grabs people's attention in a world that, is supposed to be so, like, rational
Right.
and scientific?
It is a fascinating question for sure. I mean, you think that in our modern age we would have moved past, these cryptic predictions, but
Yeah.
but Nostradamus just seems to tap into something a little bit deeper. I think
Ah.
something fundamental about being human and how we try to make sense of the world,
Hmm.
especially when it feels so uncertain and unpredictable.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So let's back up a little bit. Before
Yeah.
we get into all the prophecies themselves, let's just kind of ground ourselves a bit.
Sure.
Who is Nostradamus?
Okay.
And what was his world like?
So he was born in 1503
Mm-hmm.
as Michel de Nostredame
Okay.
in France. And he later adopted the Latinized Nostradamus,
Oh, okay.
which was something that was actually quite common among humanists of the time.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they believed in the power of names,
Hmm.
almost like a personal brand, you know?
Oh, interesting. So even back then they were thinking about branding. Huh. So, but he wasn't just a name though, right? He was a physician.
Yeah.
So what was it like to practice medicine in the 16th century? Especially with, the plague just like looming over everything.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, it was a world that was just steeped in fear and uncertainty.
Right.
I mean, the plague was a constant threat, right? And their medical understanding was very different back then, right? They believed in the four humors,
Mm-hmm.
blood and phlegm
Oh,
and black and yellow bile.
okay.
And the idea was that illness was caused by an imbalance
Mm.
in these humors.
So if you were feeling, out of sorts, it
Well,
was all about getting your humors back in balance.
yeah, pretty much. I mean, can you imagine that?
I can see how living through that time, witnessing all that firsthand,
Hmm.
that would definitely shape your worldview.
Oh, absolutely. And, his experience as a plague doctor, I think that really deeply influenced his perspective.
Yeah.
He saw firsthand how fragile life is,
Right.
how random fate can be. And I think maybe that fueled his desire to find some kind of order or predictability in all of that chaos.
Yeah. And that leads us to what he's most famous for, right? Which is his book, The Prophecies,
Yeah.
published in 1555.
Right.
So tell me about these predictions.
Okay.
What were they actually like?
Well, imagine you've got this book that is just filled with these cryptic four-line verses
Okay.
called quatrains,
Uh-huh.
written in this very ambiguous language that is just open to multiple interpretations.
Huh.
It's kind of like this historical puzzle box
Uh.
where each quatrain offers, like a glimpse into a possible future,
Okay.
but it never gives you like a clear picture.
So not exactly like, this will happen on this date kind of prophecy.
Right. More like a Rorschach test where people
Yeah.
could kind of see what they wanted to see.
Right, exactly. So that's been kind of the allure of Nostradamus' prophecies,
Yeah.
but also kind of the frustration
Right.
because they've been used to justify all sorts of interpretations throughout history,
Yeah.
often with, very different meanings,
Right.
even conflicting meanings.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can you give me an example
Sure.
of one of these cryptic quatrains and how it was interpreted?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the most famous ones is the quatrain that supposedly predicted the death of King Henry II of France
Okay.
in a jousting accident.
Hmm.
So the king died from a lance piercing his eye after 2 blows, and Nostradamus' quatrain mentioned a lion overcoming another in a duel,
Mm-hmm.
putting out his eyes in a cage of gold, and then a cruel death.
Wow.
So at the time, people saw a very clear connection, and it really solidified Nostradamus' fame.
Yeah, I can see how that would get people's attention. A prediction about a king's death, especially in a culture that really believed in prophecy and divine intervention.
Right?
It's almost like a publicity stunt,
Yeah.
even if Nostradamus, didn't intend it that way.
That's a very interesting way to look at it.
So it really raises questions about how Nostradamus himself viewed his role.
Right.
Was he a genuine seer or a shrewd manipulator of public perception? Or was he maybe a little bit of both?
Yeah, it's a puzzle that historians are still trying to figure out.
So we've got this physician living through a plague,
Right.
writing these cryptic prophecies that are open to all these different interpretations.
Right.
And then one seemingly accurate prediction just catapults him to fame.
Yeah,
It's kind of a recipe for enduring fascination, isn't it?
it certainly is.
And the story of Nostradamus doesn't end there.
No, he doesn't.
His prophecies have continued to be interpreted and reinterpreted throughout history, often reflecting the anxieties and concerns of the time,
Exactly.
which is what we'll be exploring in part 2 of this deep dive. So stay tuned as we journey through time to see how Nostradamus's prophecies have been used and abused and even celebrated throughout history.
It's going to be a wild ride.
It is.
Yeah.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Nostradamus.
Nostradamus.
We've talked about how he was this plague doctor living in Europe,
Right.
writing all these, cryptic prophecies. And then one seemingly accurate prediction about a king's death just launches him into stardom.
Right.
It's fascinating how he kind of cultivated this reputation,
Yeah.
almost like a modern day influencer,
It really is a striking parallel, isn't it? And just like today, building a brand back then
Yeah.
meant you had to understand your audience.
Right.
And Nostradamus was really good at it.
Mm.
He was a master at tailoring his approach to each individual, understanding their desires and anxieties.
So do you think that was like a calculated strategy on his part, or was it more intuitive?
Well, his letters actually offer some clues. He often ended them on a very encouraging note, assuring his recipients that the stars promise you the greatest things, even when he was delivering difficult truths.
Right.
So he seemed to understand this power of balancing hope and warning, offering guidance and comfort alongside these predictions.
So he wasn't just a doom and gloom prophet.
Right.
It was more nuanced than that.
Yeah.
Almost like a therapist of the soul.
Exactly. I mean,
Ugh.
people didn't just seek him out just for predictions. They
Yes.
wanted his counsel.
Hmm.
They wanted him to help them make sense of their world,
Yeah.
their challenges, their aspirations.
And he did that by tapping into these psychological needs,
Right.
which is amazing that he seemed to grasp this long before, the field of psychology even existed.
I know. It's fascinating, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
It's amazing how much human nature just transcends time.
Yeah.
This desire for guidance and reassurance, for
Mhm.
someone to just tell us it's all going to be okay. Even when the world feels like it's falling apart.
Especially when the world feels like it's falling apart.
But this was all happening within a very specific cultural context.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we have to remember that Nostradamus was living during the Renaissance,
Right.
which was a period marked by, humanism, a revival of classical learning,
Right.
and this deep appreciation for friendship and intellectual exchange.
So it's kind of like the Renaissance version of social media,
Yeah.
with salons and intellectual gatherings,
Yeah.
replacing our online platforms.
In a way, yeah. I mean, friendship was seen as this bond between men of reason and virtue.
Mm.
And Nostradamus really cultivated these friendships strategically.
Okay.
He built this network of support and influence,
Huh.
gaining access to powerful patrons like Catherine de Medici,
Okay.
the Queen Mother of France.
So it's not just about talent, it's about who, even back then.
Exactly.
Yeah, having those powerful allies,
Yeah.
it really amplifies your reach and your credibility.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But let's be honest, even with the most carefully crafted persona,
Yeah.
not all predictions are going to hit the mark.
Right.
So how did people react when Nostradamus got it wrong?
That's a great question. And the reactions were mixed.
Okay.
Some of his readers accepted the errors. They viewed them as just part of the nature of prophecy.
Mm-hmm.
They believed that even divinely inspired figures could make mistakes.
So they kind of gave him the benefit of the doubt?
Exactly. But others were not so forgiving.
Okay.
They saw his misses as proof of his limitations.
Mm.
They accused him of peddling fantastical hodgepodge, pestilential, poisoned, lying prophecies.
Wow.
Even Nostradamus himself acknowledged this criticism.
Really?
Oh, yeah. He lamented that even the slightest error could arouse endless mockery.
So he was aware of his critics and that potential for backlash.
Oh, for sure.
It's so fascinating how this tension between belief and skepticism has persisted throughout history.
It really has.
But even with his misses, people continue to engage with these prophecies, right?
Oh, yeah.
Trying to make sense of them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this engagement wasn't just like passively reading.
Okay.
It was an active process of interpretation,
Uh-huh.
even manipulation.
Yeah.
Think about these early printed books
Okay.
with their wide margins.
Yeah.
People would scribble notes and comments
Right.
and their own interpretations right there on the page.
Mm.
The prophecies were no different.
So it almost becomes a collaborative project. the readers contributing to the meaning making.
Right. And this collaboration wasn't limited to just individual readers.
Okay.
I mean, publishers played a role too. In the 17th century, they started adding introductions to Nostradamus's works,
Okay.
explaining his language, his use of metaphors, even his punctuation.
So it's like they were creating decoder rings for the prophecies, trying to make them more accessible, but also shaping how they were understood.
Exactly. And it really highlights the power dynamics at play, right?
Yeah.
The publishers, the interpreters, they all had a stake in shaping how Nostradamus was perceived.
Right.
And that dynamic continues today
Mm-hmm.
with countless books and websites and documentaries, all offering their own unique takes on his prophecies.
It's like a never-ending game of telephone.
Yeah.
With the prophecies being whispered and reinterpreted through the ages, each generation adding its own spin.
Right.
But amidst all this interpretation and reinterpretation, there's this recurring pattern, this surge of interest in Nostradamus during times of crisis.
Right.
So why do you think that is?
Well, when the world feels like it's falling apart, people naturally seek answers, explanations, maybe even a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
And Nostradamus, with his predictions spanning centuries, he offers this tempting source of comfort, this sense that maybe, just maybe, someone predicted it all, and it's all part of some grand plan.
So it's not just about predicting the future, it's about finding meaning in the chaos.
Exactly. Take the Great Fire of London in 1666.
Okay.
People were already on edge after the plague.
Right.
And Nostradamus's predictions about a burning city by the river just seemed to confirm their worst fears.
Yeah, so it's almost like his prophecies become a lens through which we view these events.
Right.
It adds a layer of meaning, even if it's a terrifying one.
Yeah.
And that pattern repeats itself throughout history, doesn't it?
It does. World War II is another great example.
Okay.
With the world plunged into chaos and uncertainty.
Right.
People desperately wanted explanations, and some found them in Nostradamus's quatrains, interpreting them as predictions of Hitler's rise and fall.
Yeah, it's a testament to this enduring power of prophecy.
Right.
But it's also kind of a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
About how it can be manipulated and reinterpreted to fit the anxieties of the time.
Exactly.
It's a double-edged sword. This desire for answers for meaning, it can lead us to find patterns where none exist, to see prophecies and random events. But it also speaks to this very human need for control, for the belief that even in the face of chaos, there's some order, some greater plan at work.
Absolutely. And this brings us to that darker side of the Nostradamus phenomenon.
Okay.
The world of conspiracy theories.
Right.
Where predictions are seen as evidence of these hidden agendas, and cryptic verses are deciphered to reveal these shadowy forces controlling the world.
It's a slippery slope, isn't it?
It is.
From seeking meaning to finding hidden agendas.
Yeah.
From interpreting prophecy to constructing these elaborate conspiracy theories.
Right.
And this tendency just seems to be amplified in our modern digital age, where information spreads like wildfire.
Right.
And anyone can become an expert, a prophet, a conspiracy theorist.
Yeah.
With just a few clicks.
It's a fascinating and somewhat unsettling paradox.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, on one hand, we have more access to information than ever before.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's become harder to tell truth from fiction.
Right.
Genuine insight from manipulation. And in this environment, Nostradamus just thrives.
Yeah.
His prophecies are fodder for all sorts of interpretations, both enlightening and alarming.
So we've gone from Renaissance salons to the wilds of the internet, from the plague to World War II.
Right.
And through it all,
Nostradamus
remains this constant. His cryptic prophecies continue to fascinate us, provoke us, and sometimes even terrify us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Welcome back to a deep dive into the world of Nostradamus. We've been on quite a journey, haven't we? From plague doctor to prophetic superstar.
It has been a fascinating journey.
And we've explored how his prophecies have been interpreted, sometimes manipulated, even throughout history.
Right.
And we even touched on that darker side, the conspiracy theories and the apocalyptic thinking that his work sometimes inspires.
Yeah.
But here we are in the 21st century, and I'm struck by how Nostradamus has really become this global phenomenon.
It's true.
Yeah.
And while his prophecies were primarily focused on Europe,
right,
his reach extends far beyond those borders now.
Yeah.
I mean, we're seeing this growing fascination with Nostradamus in regions like the Middle East, Asia, even Africa.
It seems like those cryptic quatrains,
Yeah.
they've transcended cultural and geographical boundaries.
That's fascinating.
It really speaks to a universal human need to kind of grapple with uncertainty, I guess.
I think so.
It's almost like his prophecies have become this shared language of anxiety, you know, resonating with people across continents who are facing very different challenges, but perhaps share that common fear of the unknown.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of fear, we can't ignore that darker side of this global fascination, the rise of doomsday cults and apocalyptic thinking.
Yeah. That's an important point. Groups like Om Shinrikyo in Japan, for example, they've drawn on Nostradamus' prophecies to justify their own, twisted ideologies, often leading to violence and fear. It's a stark reminder of how easily prophecy can be distorted and manipulated for dangerous ends.
It is a chilling thought that something meant to offer insight or guidance could be twisted into a justification for harm. It's like a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
On the one hand, Nostradamus sparks this curiosity, this desire to understand the past, and maybe even glimpse into the future.
Right.
But on the other hand, his prophecies can be used to fuel fear, hatred, even violence.
Exactly. And that tension between enlightenment and manipulation is amplified in our digital age, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
The internet, with its vast reach and its echo chambers, has become this breeding ground for conspiracy theories.
Right.
And Nostradamus often features very prominently in these narratives.
I mean, you see his prophecies kind of woven into these complex webs of interconnected events and historical figures and pop culture references.
Right.
It creates this tapestry of suspicion and distrust.
It does.
It's almost like we're living in this perpetual state of anticipatory dread, constantly scanning the horizon for signs of the apocalypse, interpreting every news headline through the lens of Nostradamus's cryptic verses.
Right.
So is this just modern paranoia? Or is there something deeper at play here?
Well, it's undeniable that our modern world is just fraught with anxieties.
Right.
Climate change, pandemics, political polarization, economic instability. These are real threats that we can't afford to ignore.
So maybe Nostradamus is just tapping into these existing anxieties, giving them a voice, a narrative, a sense of historical inevitability.
I think that's part of it, but I also think there's something about the way he framed his prophecies that speaks to a deeper human need for meaning and control. He often presented his predictions as warnings, suggesting that we actually have the power to alter our course, to avert disaster.
So it's not just about passively accepting fate,
Right.
but actively shaping our destiny?
Yeah.
It's almost like a call to action, disguised as prophecy.
Exactly. And that message of agency, however subtle, can be both empowering and terrifying. It suggests that we're not just pawns in some grand cosmic game, but we're active participants in shaping our own future.
For better or for worse.
For better or for worse.
That's a lot of responsibility to bear, especially when the future feels so uncertain.
It is.
But it also suggests that we have a choice, a chance to make a difference.
Absolutely.
There's a question that keeps nagging at me, though.
Okay.
What if Nostradamus were alive today?
Oh, wow.
What would he make of our world? Would he be a celebrated prophet? A ridiculed charlatan? Or maybe even a social media sensation?
Oh, my God.
Tweeting out cryptic quatrains to millions of followers.
I love that.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating thought experiment.
It is, isn't it?
Imagine him navigating our digital landscape.
Right.
Appearing on late-night talk shows.
Yeah.
Maybe even hosting his own podcast.
Yeah.
Would his prophecies hold the same power in our age of information overload?
Right.
Or would they just become another fleeting trend in this endless stream of content?
It's hard to say, but what we can say is that Nostradamus' legacy continues to challenge us, to provoke us, and to force us to confront our own anxieties about the unknown. His prophecies are like mirrors. They reflect back our hopes and fears, our desires for meaning and control.
Absolutely.
And perhaps that's the most enduring lesson of Nostradamus.
What's that?
The power of prophecy lies not in predicting the future, but in revealing the depths of our own human nature. Our need to make sense of the world.
Our longing for order amidst chaos.
Right.
And our enduring hope for a better tomorrow.
Well said. I think that's a perfect way to sum it up.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the world of Nostradamus.
My pleasure.
It's been a journey through history and psychology and the enduring human search for meaning in the face of uncertainty.
Absolutely.
We hope you'll continue to ponder the mysteries of Nostradamus and maybe even find your own interpretations
Right.
in his cryptic verses. Until next time, keep exploring,
Yeah.
keep questioning,
Keep searching.
and keep diving deep